That was Torrin Wells and We the Kingdom with Take It All Back. You're on Rima Central Coast 94.9. It's 13 minutes past 4 and it's Tuesday afternoon. So that means it's Creation Ministries International time, and this afternoon we have Dr. Mark Harwood on the line. Good afternoon, Dr. Mark.
Oh, good afternoon, Nick. It's great to be on the program again.
Oh, it's great to have you again. Of course, this is a middle of a 3-week session with you. We had you last week, we got you this week, and we got you next week. And,
right.
Of course, we love talking to you guys from Creation Ministries. You're always a wealth of knowledge. And I've got to ask, before you started with Creation Ministries, did you have all this knowledge, or did you slowly build it a little bit more because of your website and getting lots more information from creation.com?
Oh, we're constantly learning, Nick, learning all the time. New things happen, and there are experts in the different scientific disciplines in Creation Ministries International, and those guys do research and write articles, and the rest of us read them, and that's how you get a general working knowledge in all kinds of different disciplines in science. It's a whole lot of fun working for CMI, I can assure you.
Yes, I know Dr. John has, he has every one of the Creation magazines since the day they started. Do you subscribe to the Creation magazine as well?
I certainly do, along with the Journal of Creation as well. And, that magazine has been published now for, it started in 78. So what does that mean? Must be 47 years.
Yes, I remember my father-in-law used to have them on the table at his place when I was, courting his daughter. And, I can remember reading them just going, wow, these things are really cool, because there's some amazing, they're no better than the website now. Of course, the website has pretty much, would it have all the information from the magazines?
Yeah, it does. It ultimately, and not immediately, but ultimately all the articles on the magazine end up on the website. That's true. And the website's an absolute goldmine. It's creation.com, and it's got something like 14,000 articles and things on it that really help to strengthen people's faith that the Word of God, that the Bible is the Word of God, and also it's God-honouring material. So it's great stuff for people to get into and read.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Dr. Mark, I've got a couple of questions for you, only because I was reading through the media this week and I saw a couple of stories, and I thought, I've got to ask you this question. I might as well ask you while we're on air so as everybody can get the answer, because they might have the same question. But I saw a couple of stories. One of them was in regards to, well, here's the headline: 12,800-year-old comet explosion discovered in ocean sediment, rewriting climate history. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how they dated that one. And then I read another one, and this one was from UCLA, from their newsroom. It said 4 billion, and that, of course, they're a university, 4 billion-year-old relic from early solar system heading our way. That means it's still in the sky, and they've somehow already put an age on it of 4 billion years. How do they do that?
Well, those ages all reflect a belief, and the belief is that the universe made itself by accident without God. And when you subscribe to that belief, you are forced to have millions and millions of years in your understanding of history, or billions of years, in fact. And the reason you're forced to is because the universe is so staggeringly complex that all the things we see could not have happened by chance in a short time. So it must have taken a really, really long time. So in the case of that object hurtling towards us in the solar system, the conventional view is that our solar system is about 4.5 billion years old. And that comes about just from a belief in how cosmic evolution has happened, how stars evolved and galaxies evolved and so on, and all from a purely naturalistic point of view. The problem with it is, though, that science only works on observing things that you can actually see in the present. You can't go back into the past to make experiments on things. So what they're really reflecting is what they believe happened in the past, and that's where you get those vast ages from. It's not as though it's a measured age by any means. So, by the way, that thing hurtling towards us is called 31 Atlas, and Atlas is actually the name of an asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system. That's what Atlas stands for.
Right.
people are worried that large objects might actually collide with the Earth. And if we spotted one coming, which we can see using very clever telescopes and all kinds of great technology, which, by the way, is good science because that's observable science. They figure if we could observe one of these things coming, perhaps we could take some kind of remedial action, launch a rocket at it or something like that. So they're collecting data of it. This thing is number 31 Atlas, and they reckon it's about 12 miles wide, or that's probably about 20 kilometres wide, and it's coming at about 50 kilometres a second towards us. Now, it's a long, long way away, and they actually reckon it's going to miss us. But it's just kind of interesting, you know. People are worried about the Earth getting wiped out by a collision like that. Yeah. And I suppose that's what they must have found with that comet. But once again, the age of the comet, they would have derived that information probably from the age of their believed age, from the sediments and so on, where they found the remains of it. And that, once again, is down to things like radioisotope dating. But there are so many assumptions behind that you can't be sure. There's actually some great articles on our website that talk about the limitations of radioisotope dating. There's a whole bunch of assumptions you have to make which you can't prove, and consequently what people believe to be the correct age is what we hear about and what gets published.
Yeah. Wow, it's crazy though. The news stories don't stop. And, when they come at you from universities and stuff, you sort of think, well, they must know what they're talking about. But admittedly, when I saw the one that said, 4 billion years old and it's still in space hurtling towards us, it's like, how can you possibly put a date on that?
Yeah.
But of course, they're just going off assumptions, and you sort of think, well, there's still millions of people reading this stuff, sort of taking it for granted. Right. So, yeah.
And it conditions us to getting used to hearing about millions and millions of years. But, the reason I'm confident that they're not right is that the Bible, being God's word, gives us a timeline in the book of Genesis. And anyone can sit down and write down the ages of the father when the son next in line was born. You can find it in Genesis 5 and in Genesis 11. And you can figure out that Abraham was born about 2,000 years after creation. From Abraham to Jesus is about 2,000 years. From Jesus to the present day is about 2,000 years. So according to the Bible, not my idea, here we stand today about 6,000 years after creation. So the millions of years are just not true. They're not in the scriptures anywhere.
Yeah. Wow. And when you do see these giant rocks hurtling through space and you read some of the stories, we often hear people sort of saying, the universe was created by accident. And other people say, well, no, it wasn't. It was created by design. Can you tell us what it really is?
Well, I believe it's been designed, and I think the evidence for the universe being designed is abundantly obvious. You see, in the evolutionary story, and I should just say, Mick, that the evolutionary story is just an attempt to explain the universe without God. Yep. And so it's really just atheism in disguise, if you like, kind of dressed up in a lab coat so that it intimidates people, and people think, oh, well, they must be right. These scientists are clever. But if something had been designed, there's always telltale signs that something has been designed. And one of them is that you have an unlikely or a highly improbable arrangement of certain things. For instance, if you were walking along a beach and you came across some pebbles that were arranged in a circle and some pebbles for eyes and a nose and a mouth, you look at it and you think, oh, that's a face. But you wouldn't think for a moment that the random action of the wind and the waves acting on the pebbles on the beach would have arranged those pebbles to make a face, right? I mean, immediately somebody has picked them up and arranged it like that. Yes. Or if you saw something that said, John loves Mary, that sort of thing doesn't happen by chance. So there's been some intelligent agent external to the pebbles or the sand and has acted on it to make those things. And, everywhere we look in the world around us, we see incredibly unlikely arrangements of things. For instance, our planet has an incredible number of features that have just all lined up, apparently by accident in the evolutionary worldview, so that life is possible on Earth.
Mm.
Some people call our Earth the Goldilocks planet, in the sense that it's not too hot, not too cold, everything's just right for life. But you can look at some of these things. We live in what's called the habitable zone around our sun. We're just far enough away from the sun so it's not too hot, but we're not too far away so the Earth's not too cold, so that liquid water can exist, and liquid water is fundamentally important to life.
Yes.
We've got an atmosphere which has got just the right mix of gases, of oxygen and nitrogen and so on. Not too much oxygen, because if we had too much, then it'd be very unstable. We could have, huge conflagrations, massive fires happening. If there wasn't enough oxygen, then we couldn't breathe enough to get energy. We've got a protective magnetic field around the Earth that stops high-energy cosmic rays bombarding us and causing damage. In fact, life couldn't have evolved without the magnetic field protecting us. Or when I say evolved, I mean couldn't exist on this planet.
Yep.
We've got a solid surface, got something to walk on. A lot of planets are just gaseous balls. They don't have a solid surface.
Mm.
And we've got a nearly circular orbit, so we don't get massive swings in temperature. We've got a tilt on our axis, so we have 4 seasons. The list goes on and on and on. And the probability of all these features, all of which are necessary for life, coming about by chance is just ridiculously small.
Yeah.
And that, to me, implies there must have been an intelligent designer.
Yes. And we often hear stories from people like, I remember when Professor Stephen Hawking, when he was alive, somebody asked him, what was there before the Big Bang? And he said, absolutely nothing. So, they're basically saying, here's the theory. There's absolutely nothing. Then all of a sudden there's a bang and there's everything. And then not only is there everything, but it aligns itself so perfectly that we end up with, life and what we have in this Goldilocks zone. It's from nothing to everything, and so perfectly working. It takes so much more faith to believe that than it does in creation.
It sure does. And it gets worse when you get into the discipline of biology. When you look at how self-replicating living cell functions, it is staggeringly complex. Yeah. In fact, there was a guy called, I'll think of his name in a moment, Fred Hoyle. So Fred Hoyle, who was not a Christian, but a very astute scientist. And he was describing the probability of just one of the proteins on which life depends coming about by chance. And he said it was like having the whole solar system packed full of blind people, all randomly shuffling Rubik's Cubes and arriving at the solution at the same time. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
In other words, no one in their right mind would believe it for a moment.
Yes, absolutely. It just couldn't happen.
No, chance processes can't possibly describe it. In fact, that the major advocates for evolution recognise this. Richard Dawkins, of course, is probably the most famous advocate for evolution and anti-Christian. He once said that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Yeah. So he acknowledges that everything looks as though it's been designed, but he kind of refuses to acknowledge it.
Doesn't want to acknowledge the designer. Yes. No, look, you are on 94.9. It is 27 minutes past 4. We're with Dr. Mark Harwood from Creation Ministries International. If you have any questions for Dr. Mark, please send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. We're going to go into a song and a bit of a break now, but Dr. Mark will be back with us pretty soon. That was Brandon Murphy with Coming Home. You're on 94.9. It is 23 minutes to 5. And it's Tuesday afternoon, Creation Ministry International. We've got Dr. Mark Harwood on the line. And he's been telling us all about some pretty interesting stuff. We asked some questions about, firstly, comets, and then about the universe being an accident, or is it designed? And, Dr. Mark, you've been telling us about the design and how it sort of has to be.
I think it absolutely has to be. And the evidence for design in the world around us is just so obvious, Mick. There are several telltale signs, if you like, when something has been designed. And we talked about the incredibly unlikely arrangement of things being one of them, like the pebbles in the shape of a face on the beach. But there are many other things too. We find that, in fact, designs in nature are so refined and so good that engineers try and copy them. It's a discipline called biomimetics. That's mimicking biological designs. And that just really gives it away. It says, well, wow, nature can't just accidentally make things that are optimally designed. It just doesn't happen that way. Yeah. In fact, no matter how much time you give it. I think a lovely example of that is people would have noticed, I guess, that the wingtips of modern aircraft today are turned up with these little winglet things at the end. Yep. They didn't used to be like that. I can remember earlier passenger planes are just a flat wing at the end, until someone started to wonder, well, why do bird wings, why do the feathers at the end turn up, particularly when they're landing and that sort of thing? So someone did some experiments and discovered that by turning up the wings at the end, you reduce the amount of turbulence off the wingtip. Mm-hmm. And turbulence means that there's a lot of drag. And if you're flying an aircraft and there's drag off the wingtips, that means you're consuming more fuel than you need to. Yep. So they put them in a wind tunnel and discovered that they could reduce the drag, which means reducing the amount of fuel, which means reducing the cost of flying the plane. So it's just a classic example, but the designer of the wings in the first place knew all about those things and produced an optimal design. So when you see things like that in nature, you think, wow, there obviously must be a designer. Someone's thought this through and made these amazing things.
Yeah, well, you see, like submarines now, the new submarines are becoming they look more and more like whales and fish, and it's interesting they're using their features.
They are, and in fact, the surface of some of those things underwater are quite unusual. I've noticed that on some fish there are a lot of tiny little indentations all over the surface, and you think, well, why would that be? But when people have experimented with it once again, they find it reduces the amount of friction so the fish can move faster.
Wow.
So they start to emulate that kind of thing in submarine designs. But you look at something like bones. We have solid bones. We need the strength to hold up our body mass and so on. Birds have bones that are hollow because they have to be not only strong, but they've got to be extremely light so that the bird can fly easily. So when you look inside a bird bone, it's sort of like a honeycomb. It's a mesh kind of a structure.
Yep.
Still very, very strong, but very, very light.
That's why when I was a kid and I jumped off the tank, I didn't fly.
That could be.
Yes.
I think that might also be called the law of gravity, Mick.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's a few things that are going against me there.
Yeah. And, things like like eyes. There are more than 30 different types of eye discovered in nature. Insect eyes, multiple eyes, camera-type eyes like ours, reflective eyes like a lobster eye. They all are optimally designed for the environment in which the creature lives. It's just absolutely amazing. But, if I could, there's one other...
You sure they're just not all accidents and they all just accidentally went to the perfect spot straight away?
Yeah, well, it's a very long bow to draw, a very long bow. And the probability of that is just incredibly low.
Yes.
But, there's one other one that I think is quite fascinating, which gives away the designer, and that is that things in the world around us have a lot of beauty beyond mere functionality. Now, I was involved in designing communication satellites, and we didn't care what the satellite looked like. Mm-hmm. It just had to operate properly and fulfill its requirements. So no one worried about what the colours were on the bits of the satellite and all that kind of thing. But when we look around us, we see that there's evidence of beauty beyond what's needed for the thing to be operational or functional.
Yep.
And I think, for instance, in Genesis chapter 2, it talks about God creating trees that were pleasing to the eye. So, a tree is a plant, obviously, that draws carbon dioxide out of the air through the processes of photosynthesis. It produces oxygen. The roots draw up nutrients and water, and that's how it grows and how it functions. So it's a biological machine. But God made some of them to be beautiful to the eye.
Yep.
Now, you could have a functional plant that was ugly, that just, maybe it was like a cactus that crawled around over the ground like a vine or something. But instead of that, he's made the most extraordinary range of foliages, of textures, of colours, and the world we live in is truly beautiful.
Yep.
And you look at the way he's made people. Our faces are very expressive to reveal our emotions.
Yes.
We have voices that are capable of an amazing range of sounds, and our eyes, different colours. The facial features are balanced, with eyes and nose and mouth are symmetrically positioned, ears against the side of the head. We have smooth skin. We're not covered in fur or scales. We have an upright posture. God made us in his image to be able to relate to one another and, of course, to be able to relate to him.
Mm.
And we see beauty everywhere that's way beyond simply what's needed to be able to function. And I reckon that's a telltale sign, a dead giveaway, in fact, of an amazing creator God who just loves things and makes things that are beautiful for their own sake.
Yes, and even in that beauty, they've got all those things like the curled up feathers or the fish's sort of, I don't know what you call it, little bumps to keep them swimming fast, and yet they're still beautiful in their own way. It's like all those things work together for their good.
And you look at the diversity of things like tropical fish, for instance. I mean, if God wanted to design fish, okay, but why such a stunning variety and colours, and it's just absolutely amazing. Peacock feathers is another one. Staggering complexity in that, mathematical patterns, in fact, which only come together when the tail is open, but they exist, the component parts of that pattern exist on separate component bits, separate, what are they called, barbules, on the feathers.
Yep.
And it's just how that comes, it can't come about by chance. It's just nonsense to suggest it. It really is. In fact, Francis Crick, who was one of the guys who discovered the double helix nature of the DNA molecule, he once said biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. So why does he say you have to constantly keep reminding yourself, this is not designed, this is not designed? Well, you have to, because it looks designed, of course.
Yes.
And that's obvious because it was, in fact, designed. So the evolutionary story just tries to sell us a very low value look at the world around us, failing to see the hand of a wonderful creative God behind it all.
Yes. Yes, I think it's absolutely amazing creation. We look at it and it is stunning. Each and every day we can enjoy it, and it doesn't matter what setting you're in. I've been in deserts, and you can sit down at the end of the day and just go, "This is magnificent." You've got completely different animals living in those environments, but it is beautiful. You've just got to open your eyes to the beauty. But everything that lives there is perfect in its own way. It lives in its own perfect environment, and it's designed for that environment. It is remarkable how it all works, and it all works together in such an amazing way.
We worship an amazing God who is brilliant and creative, and he made us in his image to be in relationship with him. And that's what we discover when we read his word. So we're very blessed to live in this beautiful world, Mick.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Dr. Mark Harwood, I've got to say another awesome thank you. What a fantastic week. And we've got you again next week, I believe, which will be absolutely awesome. I'm looking forward to it already.
I'm looking forward to it, Mick.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much for your time again today. You're on 94.9. It is 13 minutes to 5. We've got Anne-Marie Keefe up next with a song called Busy. Good afternoon.